Hey folks, DM Richie here, and with me today is my wife and one of the players at my home game. Her name's Emmy, but you all know her as Dragon.
Hey!
And today on Dragons and Dice, we're talking about NPCs and how to build them. Welcome to Dragons and Dice. So as a DM, NPCs are one of my favorite parts of D&D. I really like fleshing out their backstories and their personalities, all the way up to making goofy accents for them, even though I'm terrible at them. And I do a couple different types of NPCs, random dudes and dudettes that will just be like help people get to the next town, give little pieces of lore, all the way up to fully fleshed out NPCs. And then one of my favorite NPCs is using a MacGuffin to keep that story moving.
Wait a minute, what's a MacGuffin?
So a MacGuffin is a object, an item, person, thing that is what basically promotes the story to keep moving forward. So Lord of the Rings, the ring is the MacGuffin. It's not really a character, but it's what moves the story.
Okay, cool. While we're at it, what's an NPC?
Oh, non-player character. I guess we should say that.
I thought so. I thought the audience might want to know that, though.
Yeah, good call. So in my campaigns, I basically use 4 types of NPCs, and that's what we're going to go over today. The first one's going to be the one and done. It'll be somebody that the party meets, and then they just disappear and they never are seen again, and those are really easy. The next one's going to be the fully fleshed out NPC that you put in a town or has an important backstory to go along with the story of your campaign. The third one of these that I like to build are actual player characters that I fully stat out and then have the party meet, and that way that I get to play a little bit and then the party can have those people join in. They can be used as a spare character or a replacement character if someone was to die. And the final one that we'll go over is, like we mentioned, the MacGuffin, which I really like to use in my campaigns.
So Lark, the giantess that you introduced a couple of sessions ago, would she be the third kind?
Yeah, she's a fully statted NPC that you all met. She's a bouncer at an inn, and you all talked to her, and now she's part of your party if you want her to be.
Cool.
So first up, we'll start with the one and done NPCs, and I like these to be a bit more than just a name and species and age to go off of. Sometimes that's all you need, but it's not a whole lot of work to add just a little bit of personality into each of these, and here's how I like to tackle this. I look at where these NPCs are in my campaigns. This takes care of a few things for you right off the bat. If you're making random town folk in a dwarven mine, it's easy to have most of the species there be dwarves. Age and sex don't really matter that much, except that it doesn't make sense for a super old person to be out in the field doing hard manual labor, or for a super young NPC to be in a position of power. I just try to use some common sense and go from there. These aren't super important and not an integral part of your campaign, so they're kind of just simple people that the party will meet once and then never again. They're easy to use.
They're pieces of flair.
Yes, they are. And each town is supposed to have 29 pieces of flair. I've noticed that your town only has 7 pieces of flair. One thing of note here, when you're coming up with all these little one-shot NPCs, you need a bunch of names. And that is by far the hardest part as a DM for me to come up with. And so I like to use fancy name generators. They come up with great names for you really quick on the fly. Because there's so many times that you'll be out with the party and you'll run into a random person and they'll be like, what's this guy's name?
So for Christmas, you want one of those giant baby name books?
Giant baby name books, yes.
I think it would be helpful. You'd be like, look, it's Gilbert.
He was born under an auspicious star. The other thing that I would suggest for new DMs, or old DMs for that matter, is carry around a notebook with you. Hear an interesting name or see something that you're like, hey, that'd make a good name of a mountain, a place, a lake, whatever. Write it down in a notebook, and then when you come to your sessions each week, you've got that notebook full of names of places and things that you can use. Then when your party wants to know somebody's name, you can just open up your notebook of endless names. That's a legendary artifact, attunement required by an overzealous DM, and be like, hey, I'm Blaze McFizzlequark. This will let you integrate these names straight into your campaign, and it'll be seamless and seem like you always had it planned. Another place I use these simple NPCs is for when I forget something crucial in the story or have to find a bit of lore that I need to get into the party's hands, or if they're headed in the wrong direction and I haven't prepared that area, I have a random guy come by and they're like the couriers from Skyrim. Hey.
So that guy's name is bullshit.
Yeah, his name's bullshit.
Yeah.
Hey, I've got a letter for you. here it is. Well, gotta go. And it'll just be a little snippet of information. And then hopefully gets the party back on track. But it never fails that this is the NPC, the random person they run into, that the party wants to know the most about.
Give me more information about that bullshit guy.
All right, here's your more info on the bullcrap guy. So, when this happens to me, my first thought is like, oh shit, I wasn't ready for this. And then my second thought is, I just try to think about who this person is supposed to be. And then I ask myself a few questions, and it goes pretty easy from that. If he or she is doing a job, you know, they probably have a normal life as far as that goes in D&D. That's easy to relate to. I do that, and then I just keep heading down that path and answering the party's questions as they come up. These can be some of the most interesting and fun interactions you get to have with your party because it's all off the cuff.
So basically you reenact that scene from Zoolander where he looks into the puddle and is like, who am I?
Yes.
I don't know.
I don't know, Derek.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do. Zoolander's a good inspiration for my DMing style.
Also for your hair.
Ah, yes, good point. I think one thing to keep in mind as we're DMing is to remember that while we may have the eye in the sky view of everyone and we're like, why do they want to talk to this random nobody in the inn or wherever, is that's the player's only way of getting information for what they're doing in the campaign is what you give them with the people that they meet. And so I think it's important, even when you have a rando that's not that important and they want to know more, use it as a way to give them more information about what's going on.
With our particular group, they also want to know, should we kill this person and take their stuff?
Most of the time, yes. It's like, they're a harmless widow. What can we do for you?
Kill them!
Off with her head.
Exactly.
Now let's hop into what I call my fully fleshed out NPCs. And this will be any character that the party may meet more than once. Most of the shopkeepers, innkeepers, priests, main guard, mayors of big towns. And I like these to be well-rounded characters so that each time the party meets them, they've got a little bit more personality to add into them. And I go about this in a few ways. The way I start with these is I do 4 things. I do a name, their sex, what species they are, and then what their occupation is. And this will give you a pretty good starting point, and from there, we'll start fleshing them out. And that's the basic template that we were using for our one and done NPCs earlier. The next 4 things are where your characters start becoming well-rounded, and it also requires quite a bit more work on the DM's part. And these 4 things are going to be that NPC's desires, their fears, relationships they have to other people, and then their demeanor as they interact with the party and other townsfolk. For desires, adding this into your NPC, it gives them direction and goal. It makes them easier for you to roleplay as the DM because you kind of know where that person is trying to get in life. If you know that priest is driven by ambition and desires to replace that temple elder, you can play him that way. Or if you know that soldier really wants more time at home to spend with his wife, then it'll be easier for the party to persuade him to go home. Having that in your little book about your NPCs, when the party runs into them, it really makes you seem more authentic when you're acting that person out at the table.
So this sounds pretty time consuming. How many do you typically create for each session? Or do you create a new one each session?
It's a good question. I actually don't do them per session. I normally do it when I build the cities. And each part of the city I like to give the mayor or town leadership, whatever religious people there are there, all the shopkeepers, innkeepers, and then if there's anybody else that I want to give out a quest, I normally go ahead and do a little snippet for each person like that. So when I have a decent sized town, I'll have 15 to 20 of these for each town.
Okay, so like batch creating.
Yeah,
content.
Yeah, that's how I like to do it. Like I do it by area.
Okay.
Fears is the next thing I add to the characters. And this is the other side of the coin from desires. If you build your characters with wants, they should have fears too. Now the party can try the carrot or the stick if they want to interact with them. They can persuade that captain to give you a ride to the capital, or they can try to intimidate him by threatening to reveal that he's been smuggling wine into the humans. When you build NPCs with fears and desires, they're built in a way that are more fun to interact and roleplay as the DM, and the fears give your parties ends as ways of manipulating it so that you can give them items or work out storyline, or if you can do campaign quest-based stuff. It's a really interesting thing to have the party try to manipulate people.
So, do you ever just randomly change that stuff when you're interacting with us at the table?
Oh, a lot. There's a lot of times random things will come up and it'll be like, oh, you caught me doing this or whatever. So
I thought you might.
Yeah, so I think most DMs do. It's got to be fluid, so.
Well, we'd never know.
That's true. You get to hide behind the screen. It's always nice. The third feature I add into well-rounded NPCs is I like them to have relationships with other people in the area that they're in. None of us exist just in a void, and so your characters in your games to seem authentic shouldn't either. This doesn't need to go super in depth unless you need it for story or plot. It can be as simple as like the 4 shopkeepers in the bazaar have a poker night every Thursday, or the waiter at the inn doesn't like the mayor because she doesn't tip well. Just little snippets of interactions that these people have had with other people in the town makes them seem so much more genuine and well fleshed out and well rounded. And I think that really translates into the party.
I agree. It makes a difference in how we interact with all of the people.
Yeah. I have one where, like, this shopkeeper doesn't like that shopkeeper. They want you not to go there, and...
All of your NPCs have feuds.
That's true. They do.
It's a lot of feuding.
It's true. It makes for, the game is about feuding. The final thing I add into these NPCs is I like to keep a little notebook for myself, and it's basically their demeanor, and this can change as the party interacts with the NPC, whether or not they're friendly toward them or abrasive, kind or cruel, funny or serious, and so on. And I like to just keep a little book beside me with the NPC's name, all their information on it, write down how the party's interacting with them, information that's been given to them. And then when they come back to the NPC, I've got all that there in front of me, and that person seems like the same person each time that they meet them.
He's a huge proponent of the little notebook. He has so many.
I do like my little notebooks. I carry them around with me every day. Doing these things for NPCs, I think, really increases the opportunity for role play at your tables. If that's not something you're into as much, this might not be something you will spend a lot of time on. Our table, we really like the goofiness that happens. Some of our most fun nights are in the towns and in taverns, and not just when we're out fighting things. So I really like to put the time and effort into each of these people having personalities like they're real people. And I think that really translates into a fun table and makes for fun nights. The next type of NPC is the one that I call the DM PC or the future PC. Sometimes, besides just DMing, I want to play a character. I know, crazy.
All the time you want to play a character.
I do.
You want to DM and have like 8 characters as well.
I do. So what I do for this is I will fully stat out characters and normally put them like a level or 2 below the party. And then I'll put them in the party's path. And if the party comes across them and everything works out and they want the party to join, they can join up with the party for a while, and I'll play that character out for the first battle or so. I do want to issue a little bit of a DM warning here. I just play these characters in combat. There's no point in me as the DM making a story, running a campaign, and then having these characters that I'm playing doing the interactions when we're in town. That's for your parties to do, and let your players take the lead on that. And then the way I like to run these is after the initial intro and the first fight, we will pass this character sheet around to the party if they want to use them with them and if they're involved, and then each person gets to take a turn with it. You normally do the highest person on initiative gets first round, and then you just pass it around clockwise. And I like doing this because it lets the players try out new characters that aren't involved in the game. So if you're playing a bunch of casters and you get a melee character that you get to meet, it lets you try out other parts of D&D. I've done this twice in the current campaign that I'm running. One was an Orc Barbarian Berserker that they met in a prison cell, and they asked if you'd help them clear out the rest of the dungeon. I said, sure, but you have to share your EXP with them, which I love their response. They were like, that's fine, but we're keeping him. He's ours now, and we get to use him as we want. I handed the sheet over, and now he's part of their team. They keep him on a farm at their little base, training an owlbear for them and tending house.
So how did this character go from one of the players to his little side hustle? I wasn't part of the party, so I don't know his origin story.
The way we started out using him was he just joined the party and he was an extra character, and we passed the sheet around so people could try out a barbarian class. After that, if we have an extra player that came by and wanted to hop in for the night, they can always grab that extra character that was already made. Barbarians are pretty simple. They would use that. And then the party got big and they got selfish with their EXP and decided they didn't want to share with him. So they relegated him back to their home base, and him being a barbarian, he has good animal handling. They have him raising a pet owlbear now and tending the farm.
Oh, and a crustacean as of a few weeks ago.
That's true. You did find a giant crab egg, but it hasn't hatched
Priscilla.
yet. Her name will be Priscilla when it hatches. The other one of these that the party's met is a Lady Goliath, and she's a Rune Knight fighter, and she was a bouncer in an inn. And after the party did an arena battle, they went back and she was there, and they bought her some drinks and she told them their story. And
then we said, "You want to go bounce with us?"
And her being a bouncer, she totally did. So,
except we don't really have her yet.
Yeah, she hasn't actually went out with y'all yet, but it's a nice class for the party to try out. They don't have a fighter, and the party table that we run right now is very caster heavy, and so most of these that I've made are melee. That's another good suggestion for DM, is if you're adding these in and you have all melees, throw in a caster class. It lets the party be a little more varied and, try out all the aspects of D&D.
Or you could mirror someone's character and just completely screw up their world.
Yeah, so I died. I am now playing so-and-so number 2.
Yeah.
The exact same
Please
character.
don't do that. We would all hate it.
I know. One last thing about this NPC. If you're on a small table, it's a good way to add in an extra character if you want to throw some bigger monsters out there. If you're running only a 2 or 3 person table and want to have something big to fight, this lets you bump up the CR of the stuff that people are fighting. And let's face it, we don't get to run as many D&D campaigns as we would like to in our lives. You're only going to get to play a few characters for how long each campaign takes. This is a good way of letting people try out all the different classes that there are. Now it's time for a homebrewed item of the week. Today's homebrew item is a custom feat for rogues, and it's the Dagger Master feat. And with this feat, your daggers now do 1d6 of damage instead of 1d4, and if you're dual wielding daggers, when you take your attack action, you can attack with both, but you have to make a hit for the second one. When you succeed on an attack, you can pick whether the damage is slashing or piercing, and your daggers no longer have disadvantage on throw range, so you can throw them for the full 60 feet. I limited this feat to rogues only because they don't get extra attacks. If you gave this to a fighter or a paladin, it would allow them to stack attacks and stack smites. Even with rangers with their hunter's mark, they could go melee ranger, hop in with dual daggers and do a lot of extra damage with this. But I feel like it is a nice little extra add-on for rogues who like the flavor of carrying daggers, which I would if I was playing a rogue. And that's why I made this. Now it's MacGuffin time. And these are the people that move the story forward and are a great tool for the DM to have in their pocket, because it's always a pain in the butt getting the party to go and do the things you need them to.
Okay, so this term MacGuffin, where did it come from? Do you know? Did you make it up?
I did not, and no, I didn't. It's just used a lot for what drives the story forward.
Okay, so more research is needed.
Yeah, definitely. So, in the campaign I'm running right now, this is the way I've used the MacGuffin that I made. He's a swashbuckling pirate. He teleported the party to his boat. They woke up in the brig. He was the one that freed them, even though they didn't ask much questions on how they got there. And then there was a sea battle. The boat got sunk by a big baddie. And then he teleported them away, only to pop back up and then start giving them some quests. And this worked really well for a few reasons. My home table players are very accepting that it's going to be a fun and interesting campaign, and they're really good about just going with the flow of it. I had this guy, he popped back up about session 5. He told him a bit of lore about a lost island, and that's where Amrock now resides. They went there, did the quest, killed the people, took the island for themselves, and then super spoiler, and they should know this before it airs, but if you're at my home table, earmuffs right now, he's been a dragon, and he's been around a lot more than they know. He's made about 5 or 6 appearances, and they all really like interacting with him, and I use him as a way of giving the party some direction, lore, and a bit of help when some combat gets out of hand. And that brings me to my next point about using a MacGuffin, is it can really save your bacon when you're balancing combat. I run a huge table. We have 8 players right now. One of them has a pet owlbear. We've got a warlock with a bag of tricks that summons out something nasty and mean all the time, and a Drake Warden Ranger with a pet Drake. So combat is nutso, and it's super hard to balance. So there are either 1 to 3 big monsters that can literally one-shot people all the way to totally dead, or I have to run a lot of small things. I normally opt for doing the big baddies for a couple of reasons. 1, the party feels really cool when they get to take down something fearsome like a Hydra or Wyvern while they're level 2 and 3. And 2, if I throw enough mobs at the party to make it a challenging fight, it would take 2 sessions for 10 NPCs to fight 30 monsters and take their turns. So here's the way I use my MacGuffin, is I'll have them in that area. They have a high enough level, although I never stat them out. I just have them hop in if something hits a fan, and they don't have to do a lot. Maybe they throw a shield on someone about to be hit, or they remove a curse from a player that failed to save and are turned into a werewolf. I had the same pirate guy. He was dressed in drag in a prison cell where they found Amrock, and the temple was full of werebeast. He got out, he smote a few people, cured them of their lycanthropy, faked an injury, and left. And that's a shout out to my brother-in-law. It was his idea for him to have him there. It was a great idea. And the party never even asked who it was. I loved it, and I bet they will too when they hear this. So that about wraps up the way we use MacGuffins and how I go about making all my NPCs. Do you have a favorite NPC from the campaign we're running?
I don't remember his name, but he's the one that you meant for him to sound like one of the Skyrim characters, but it ended up sounding like Zoolander.
Yeah.
No, not Zoolander.
Dwight Goodman from Dodgeball. Yeah, his name was Zalar, and he was supposed to sound like the Irish guy from the Thieves Guild, and he ended up sounding like Dwight Goodman.
I would like a little taste of that, if you recall it.
All right, let's see. I know a couple of things. 1, you're supposed to go and get me them items. And you still hadn't went and got me them items.
Yes, definitely. That's my favorite.
I am not happy about it. Yeah. So I do impersonations for all my characters and my NPCs. I'm not very good at them, but they do get laughs.
They're really great.
So that's another good thing for DMs to think about. If you are willing to be the goofball at the table, it makes it a much more friendly and open place for other people to get into their role play and do their things. And that's why I go about doing it.
I agree.
So, that's all we've got for today. Well, folks, that's it for this episode of Dragons and Dice. Thanks for listening, and if you like what we're doing here, please like, subscribe, or leave a review. It really helps with exposure of a new show. And until next time, may your notebooks be filled with names and your accents as hot as flames. Bye.